Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements, and we are together.
Yeah.
Again.
I mean, it's been a while.
I mean, it's been like 3 weeks.
Last time I was on by Zoom because I had COVID.
Yeah.
Then I was out of town, and then you got COVID.
I did get COVID. I got COVID last week.
So is that your second?
That was my second time.
Yeah, and I had it. That was my second time.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go to the mat. Z-Pack.
Z-Pack.
Z-Pack
I didn't do that.
knocks it.
I just toughed it out.
Well, I mean,
I
you
just
don't
toughed it
probably
out.
have a good doctor like I do. You know?
I don't have a good doctor.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's good to
I
be
didn't
back.
call my
It's
doctor.
good to be back. It was weird me sitting here a couple weeks ago and just looking over and like, oh, well, you now have to look up to
Yeah.
the camera.
Well.
So, but we have a really special guest on our show today.
Yes, we do.
Simon Rosenberg of the New Democratic Network, probably our most prominent member Democrat that we've had on. I don't think we've had that many.
No,
To be honest
we've
with you.
had people who are
Left-leaning.
like Roy Roberts.
But Simon actually, I mean, he knows what's going on in the Democratic Party
Because he's been there for
He's been there.
a long
He's
time.
been part
Not to
of the
age you,
Clinton
Simon, but you know, you've been there for a while.
administration, Obama, the whole 9 yards. And I got to meet Simon. I've been working with Simon, 15 years, Simon.
Yeah.
And as part of the seminar that I put on, that Simon is very helpful with the Young Presidents Organization, YPO, we do a seminar called Inside Washington. And Simon is always one of our first guests who kicks us off. And we usually have like Grover Norquist and then Simon. And as the contrarian sort of, he usually comes in and says, I don't know what Grover said or whoever said, but let me tell you what's really happened.
Yeah.
And he always, I think it's safe to say our guests our members are always a little center right, and so Simon's a really good sport.
Yeah,
I have to say,
that's good.
because
And it's
there's a
good
lot
for
of
the-
people who would challenge him on.
Well, and
on
good
some
for
stuff.
people to hear an intellectual argument of the other side. Because Simon, I mean, the one thing that stands out for me with you is that you have solid arguments. I mean, it's not just vitriol. It's not name calling. It's actual philosophy. So we'll get into some of that.
Yeah. And Simon used to be a frequent guest on Fox News and Megyn Kelly, and I used to text Simon as he was on. You know, so is she really? So what does she look like a comparison? You know, because that's what everybody really wants to know about.
Yeah.
But oh well. But Simon, thanks so much for being here. And,
Yeah, it's great to be here.
And obviously, a lot going on in the country right now. A lot going on with your party and the presidency. And we've got January 6th open hearings tonight. We've got a gun control bill that pretty much sailed through on party lines in the House, and probably won't do much in the Senate.
No, it's dead in the Senate. But the Senate is actually, I mean, for the first time in my political career, the Senate is seemingly getting pretty serious about passing something.
Yeah. What do you think, Simon? What sort of things are you working on?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think right now in this election, the real focus is on the economy, right? I mean, and Biden and the Democrats are going to have to defend what we've done. And what we've done is that we've led a very, very strong recovery. Inflation is too high, and we need to keep working to get it down. And I think a lot of voters, this is really, when you look at polling, I mean, this is the central issue on people's minds right now. And I think it's going to be the central issue over the next 4 to 5 months. I think we have a lot to run on. I think that we've seen historically strong economic growth. GDP growth has been very high. We've seen more new businesses formed in the last year than any year in American history. There's a lot of vitality and entrepreneurship and resilience in the American people. The American people, they didn't retreat during COVID. They went out and went to work. They just went to work in a different way, perhaps, than in the past. And I think we should be very proud of the American people for what they've done to create such a strong recovery. But we've got to work to get inflation down. It's too high. A lot of what's driving inflation now is coming from the Russian war, right? And food prices and high gas prices are the fault of Vladimir Putin. And he's created global inflation, and it's a global challenge. But it matters to the American people. We've got to do more. And so I think that's going to be really where the battle lines of the election are going to be fought. I think this is going to be a very competitive election. I'm not of the belief that Republicans have some significant advantage. There just isn't a lot of polling in actual races to suggest that there's any kind of Republican wave. And certainly it's not an anti-incumbent year, right? You don't see a lot of governors in trouble anywhere. There isn't sort of a throw the bums out kind of attitude right now. And so I think we're going to have a very competitive election. And Democrats are going to have to, look, when you're the incumbent party, you're graded on, are things better? Do people think things are better? If people think things are better by November, we're going to do fine. If they don't, we're going to have a tough election. And I think we've got a good case to make, and we got to get about making it.
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I disagree, not surprisingly, on some stuff. I find it. I view the landscape for the Republicans, which should be ideal because it's a first-term president and the first midterm and all the different historical things you look at, and there are challenges with inflation. I think that what it is, what the reason that I think Republicans will do very well in House races, as opposed to Senate. I think the Senate is a toss-up. I think it could go either way with the flip of a coin.
Sure.
I don't think it's going to be a big shift. It's probably going to be one or two seats. Someone will have the majority. It probably won't be 50-50, but it will be 51-49 or 52-48 at most. But I think the House is in for a big change. And I think it's because there are so many. The Democrats in the House tend to be way more liberal, and following more the AOC view.
Sandy Cortez.
Yeah, than the others. Those that are running in the Senate. And Simon, I'm interested in you look at a variety of different. Obviously Virginia, New Jersey with the governor's races. That was kind of. Whoa, that's earth-shattering, particularly New Jersey. I think New Jersey is a bigger story than Virginia, frankly. The fact that New Jersey's governor only won by, a percentage point or two in a state that Biden carried by 16. Mm-hmm. But you look at some of these, indicators, like the school board recall in San Francisco, and now just this last week, this DA that got recalled. That's pretty big. Doesn't that send a real big message to Democrats across the board, and kind of what you and people of your ilk have been saying is we need to be focused on things that people care about, not all this craziness.
Yeah, and look, I think that where I have a slight disagreement with you in the House, and where I will agree with you in the House, is that when waves come, the House incumbents tend to be less capable of surviving the wave, right? Because they're just not as well known. Senators have more resources. So you're right that if there's a Republican wave that manifests, it's more likely to happen in the House. And I just will tell you, though, that the incumbents the Republicans are running against are not AOC Democrats, right? Many of them have military backgrounds. We have 3 Naval Academy grads, in our pool of people. And so you actually have most of the incumbents in the House are people who are not politicians prior to running in 2018 or 2020. Almost every candidate who's up is recently elected. And they also survived what was a good Republican year in the House in 2020, and they're raising a lot of money. And so I think the House is going to be very competitive. And I think the other reason why is that I think there's an anti-MAGA majority in America. I think that, we saw in the last 2 elections, the average Democrats won those 2 elections by an average of 6.5 points, right? It's a big number. We had historic high turnout in both elections. So more people have voted against MAGA than have voted against any politics in the history of the country. And the question would that anti-MAGA majority show up again in this election? And I think that with the school shootings, with the Roe v. Wade, the potential of that being eliminated, what we're going to see with the January 6th committee, I think that there's those people, those swing suburban voters who voted against Republicans twice, are going to be reminded about why they voted against the Republican Party. And I think what it creates is a very low ceiling for the Republicans this election. And it doesn't mean they don't win. I'm not saying that. They could easily win the House. But the question is the ceiling 51 or is it 49? Because, Trump never broke, the Republicans haven't broken 46, 47% of the vote in a long time. And so, we'll see. I mean, if the Republican Party had moderated and run away from MAGA, I think they would be running away with the election right now.
I
but they
totally
didn't.
agree with you on that.
Yeah,
I,
they didn't. And they,
absolutely 100%
yeah.
agree.
And what's interesting is even in Arizona, right? I mean, we just did some Hispanic polling, and Mark Kelly is running 10 points ahead with Hispanics of where he was 10, in 2020. And amazingly, the Democrat Republican brands in Arizona with Hispanic voters is better. The Democratic brand is better in Arizona than it is in Nevada. And I think that's in part because, as you know very well, in Arizona, the sort of the more radical part of the Republican Party has been very visible there
Hmm.
over the last year and a half, and it's seeped in. People have been paying attention, and so, I think that's where the Republicans, I think, have a low ceiling, and we just don't know how low it's going to be this year.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I can't believe we're agreeing. This is great. I think in Arizona, when I'm actually working on a piece on this right now. I think what we're seeing in Arizona is a conservative crack up to use
Yeah.
a book that was very formidable in our youth.
Right.
By our Emmett Terrell of the American Spectator, and that is you're having candidates who really have no guiding principles and no guiding understanding of why they're running, what they want to achieve, and what they want to do, and instead wrapping themselves in personality, and because of that, people are turning away from the Republican Party in some circles, and you have movement conservatives who are looking at these personalities who really have no business running for dog catcher, and was suspect because they don't have any guiding real principles, and and I think that matters. I think that matters in the long term, and we've seen that. I think has been the Trump effect within the party, the cult of personality versus the the holding of conservative principles and running on those and understanding what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
We have several candidates here who have wrapped themselves fully in that MAGA mantra, and I think there's a place for it. Certainly within the grassroots, if you want to call it that, but they simply are going to be making forced errors, thinking that's going to carry them over the finish line versus understanding what it is they want to achieve and why they're running, and what they want to do for the state. And most of them have no clue what they want to do for the state.
Well, and I think that goes to your point, Simon, that
Yeah.
not
Great
just
point,
in Arizona, but all across the country, who the Republicans nominate is going to matter on how
Yeah.
big the wave is. Because, as you point out, we as a party abandoned the Trump philosophy, and I'm not saying the issues, because on the issues he was guided correctly, but if we'd gotten rid of the, as you point out, Chris, the cult of personality, this would not even be a question. I mean, this would be a slam dunk for Republicans up and down the ticket without even lifting a finger, because the structural advantages are just so apparent. But we have it makes politics is always very interesting, and this year, which should be kind of a pretty bland in the sense of, oh, it's going to be a Republican takeover, blah blah blah. It's very interesting because you have the hardcore left of the Democrat Party that's kind of spinning out of control. You've got the hardcore right of the Republican Party, which is spinning out of control, and so it adds a lot of chaos
Drama.
to this and drama.
Just
So
drama.
it isn't going to be just a kind of a run-of-the-mill election that you expect the pendulum to be swinging. I mean, there's going to be surprises all over the place,
Yeah.
both ways. No question
I agree with
about
that. I think it's, look, I want to praise Kevin McCarthy about in one way, which is that part of the reason the Republicans made gains in 2020 in the House, even though Joe Biden won the national vote, was because he recruited candidates that were harder to label as MAGA, and they were also more women, more people, more minorities and people of color, right? And so they were, but the difference this time, and the thing that I think is, and he's done it again, by the way, the recruitment by the Republicans had been very creative in the House, and so I give them kudos on that. The question is going to be, though, is that I just think it's going to be very easy for any Democrat to say, if you vote for my Republican opponent, you get MAGA chaos in Washington, and that wasn't true in New Jersey and in Virginia. Those were state races. They
Right.
weren't. Neither of those candidates were deeply connected to this national thing. And the truth is, the House Republicans have embraced MAGA with more enthusiasm than any other element of the Republican Party right now, other than a handful of governors races and so on. And it's been a wholesale embrace of Trump, right? And MAGA, and I think that McCarthy lost control here. He could have created a different understanding of who the Republicans were, and they've just been unable to do it. So I think these tensions that you're describing, which is you have the old traditional conservative, Republican Party, and now you have MAGA, and there's a competing ideology, right, inside the Republican Party, and how this plays out is going to be, to your point, unique in every state and in every race. And I will tell you, though, having been in Democratic politics for 30 years, we have more material to label Republicans as out of the mainstream in each of these races than we've ever had in any race that I've been part of. And because the Republican Party is more out of the mainstream than it's ever been.
Well,
So that's where that's why I still think like this is like going to be a college basketball game. It's going to be close to the end, and then anybody can win. And a lot will come down to, frankly, the performance of these in the House anyway, of the individual candidates, I think, and how they perform.
Yeah. And I will point out that as much as you have material about the Republicans, Democrats have been the gift that keeps on giving.
Well, certainly,
as well.
I guess a contrarian view from Simon is this president is the gift that keeps on giving. And I mean, how do you, as a Democratic strategist,
let me interrupt you for 1 minute, because I actually think that Biden is less of the gift that keeps on giving, because there's so many other radical elements within the party that just are so far. But
I'm talking about
your
just
point
two points specifically that he mentioned that will play a part within the election. Inflation, number one, gas prices, people vote their pocketbooks overwhelmingly. In our neck of the woods, immigration is going to be a massive factor. And I'm still wondering, for somebody like a Mark Kelly, and I'd love your perspective on this, Simon, when does he, we keep asking this, when does he really pivot strongly in a way that helps him away from, Biden's falling poll numbers on immigration and some other economic issues, and start offering proposals to fix things? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, one of the most interesting questions in this election right now is whether or not Biden's approval rating is as important as an approval rating traditionally is.
Sure.
And others, have raised this, and I'm in the thing I keep coming back to, and it happened even just in this set of polling I just was involved in Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania with Hispanic voters, is that when it actually came to the vote, are you going to vote for this Democrat or this Republican, the actual named candidates? Mm-hmm. That's when the Democratic margin got the biggest, right? Party ID, the sort of the perceptions of the two parties were closer, right? But in each of the three states where Mark Kelly's numbers went up the most is when you said, okay, you want to vote for this Democrat or this Republican. And I think that the reason I'm raising this is that I think that it's possible that Biden is just not going to be a major factor in this election, or that his suppression of the Democratic brand has been baked in, but people are going to vote on these individual races and not on Biden. I mean, you can be disappointed with Joe Biden and still vote against Republicans up and down the ticket, right? Those things are possible. 51.5% of the country voted for Joe Biden. And so all Democrats have to do is get 47, 48% of that 51, and we win the election, right? I mean, we don't have to get it. I mean, the math favors us here, right? Because of the strong showing we had in the last two elections. But I will say that for Mark Kelly, I think you're already seeing him break with Biden on immigration. That's already happened, right?
A little bit.
The Title 42 stuff is a big deal. I don't think that's a small thing, actually, in our party, right? Mm-hmm. It may not be seen as, and I do think that Biden has time to make clearer to the public what his stance is on immigration. And I certainly am an advocate for them to lean in more here. I think his position is being defined. They're basically not engaging, right, and letting the other side define, his strategy on immigration and the border. And we've got to do more to even that up. I mean, I think you're right. I think in Arizona and the Southwest, these issues will matter a lot. I don't know that they're going to matter so much in the rest of the country, right? I mean, Trump, remember in 2018, Trump tried to close the election on immigration and the caravan, and he lost the election by 8.5 points. Traditionally, immigration is a motivating issue to bring Republicans to the polls, but it doesn't really work that well with swing voters, and because it's just down the list of importance, right? But I agree with you. I think this election is different, and it speaks to the question of, is Biden in charge? Is he strong leader? This gets to strong leader, weak leader issues that I think he's got to address more forcefully in the coming months. But I think what we're seeing is, and you guys even said at the beginning of the broadcast, I mean, the Senate races are decoupled from Biden. And I just wonder whether or not, Biden is not as that again. Can you be disappointed in Joe Biden and still vote against Republicans up and down the ballot? That's not a big leap, right? Like that's not some crazy and I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to do that. The question is how many.
Yeah.
And we just don't know.
Well, and that's it goes to what the turnout models will look like as well. I mean, obviously there's a lot of enthusiasm on the Republican side because there is this boogeyman. So the question is, are there going to be sufficient issues that motivate, Democrat voters in a way that they were motivated in 2018 and 2020 to get the gains that they did? And I think that's a question. Trump is not on the ballot, and the January 6th Commission is trying to.
He is.
Well, yeah, but the January 6th Commission is trying to, hype this up as far as his role. And is that going to translate to motivated Democrats? I don't know. And I'm not even certain that gun control and the abortion issue are going to move, I feel like if you are very motivated by gun control or abortion, you're voting in every election anyway.
Yeah,
you're not somebody that is a casual voter.
Well, let me come to that, because I think this is, if we got time,
sure,
it's important to watch on that. So, the issues of gun control and abortion matter most for younger people, right? And younger people in our coalition are the most Democratic part of our coalition and are the most infrequent voters.
Mm-hmm.
So if these two issues together create more turnout among younger people, because abortion just materially affects younger people more than older people, right? So it is an actual more of a voting issue for younger people. If these two things together, increase youth turnout in races across the country, that's a huge problem for the Republican Party, because young people are overwhelmingly Democratic,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, plus 20, plus 30, depending on the state, right? You can buy. And so I do think that this, and what the Institute of Politics at Harvard just released a poll of 18 to 29-year-olds showing that their vote intent now is equal to their vote intent in their polling in 2018, right? I was a little surprised by that. And what could happen among your Republican polling friends who don't understand Democratic audiences that well, they could be easily under modeling youth performance, which is making the electorate more Republican in their mind than it may really be. This is the big wild card. And the big wild card in this race is that if young people vote in large numbers, the Republicans are not going to have a good election. And I think the likelihood of that happening has increased dramatically in the last few weeks. It's not a done deal, right? I'm not saying it is. But it's the election's changing from where it was, and we'll see how far it goes. I mean, we also have to see what happens with the Supreme Court. We don't know. The decision hasn't been made. But making Roe v. Wade illegal. I mean, you've seen the polling on this, right? I mean, most polls, things are in the 40s and 50s either way, right?
Right.
42, 55, right? It's in the middle somewhere. the number of Americans who want to see Roe v. Wade eliminated is in the 20s. It's in the 20s, right? I mean, this is something, it's almost impossible for the Republicans to have, if this happens, to have pursued a politics that is more unpopular than what's about to happen with the ending of Roe v. Wade. And I think it's going to materially affect the Republican brand in the election in a negative way, particularly with younger people where, the issue of their still child rearing years and all that stuff, this stuff really matters. And so, we'll see.
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously, it will be interesting. And you point out a really interesting dynamic, which we go through every election cycle, which is how bad the polling is. Because the Democrat pollsters don't understand Republican voters, and the Republican pollsters don't understand Democrat voters.
I agree 100% on that.
I don't know where and every time there's a Democrat and a Republican pollster who work together on trying to figure it still never gets worked out. I don't know what the future of polling looks like unless they just continue to say, "Hey, we're close enough."
I think. Can I tell you what I think has really been the big issue?
That's a great
There's so much money in politics now that people are voting in such high numbers. I mean, that there's just so many people voting now that it means the electorate's gotten bigger, and so it's harder,
which is a good thing.
Yes, no,
it's
super positive. It's really positive, right? But it also makes your projecting who's going to vote harder.
Yep.
And so it just means that this basic thing where you have to guess on who's really going to vote. I mean, it's an educated guess, but there's more ability to make errors there because we have so many new voters. But look, the Republican Party, Trump got a lot of votes. There are a lot more infrequent Republican voters now than there's ever been.
Right.
I mean, the Republican Party's changed in recent years. That makes it harder to poll. The more infrequent voters you have who are not necessarily going to show up means that what they call the model is just harder to get right? It's just it's a math thing, right? And so that's now true in both coalitions. And so the possibility of error has increased in polling. There's no question.
Yeah. We'll continue to see that develop.
Well, I mean, we've said it on the show, and I know you know this, Simon. I mean, elections are decided in the last 2 weeks. I mean, whatever we think right now is kind of irrelevant.
Well, and I think, and it goes
between
to
what happens now and the last 2 weeks of the election is going to be monumental.
And in a close election, the people who will make the decision, the people who will decide the election are the ones who are not even paying attention to anything right now.
No,
they're
they're
the
at
indifference
the
they're
in Europe.
literally won't be
They're
until
doing their
the
thing.
very end. So it's crazy when you think about how much money is spent over the course of an election. And it really comes down to this, let's call it 8 or 9% of people who make their decision late. If you're in a close race, it could go either way.
It could decide everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why we play the game.
Yeah.
That's why it's a contact sport. Well, thank you, Simon, so much for
Full
being
contact.
here.
Yeah, listen, I
Yeah,
enjoyed
we
it.
want to have you back because sometime before the election for sure, maybe after the few more primaries have happened, if you're open for it. And then, of course, depending on how things happen, we'll have to do a post-election analysis on where we were right, where we were wrong.
Well, that was always the great thing about having Simon at Inside Washington, because we always did it right after the election, and to get the two perspectives right after the election, what went right, what went wrong, what the future looked like. We had a couple good elections, and Simon was always really great about talking about the positive for the Democratic Party in terms of what went right, and I always thought it was fascinating. And always appreciated his perspective, and certainly appreciate you coming on today. So thanks so much, brother.
I always appreciate the opportunity to correct all the things that Grover had said before me. And listen, I appreciate. Listen, thanks for what you guys are doing. It's important for whatever part of this political spectrum you're on to be out there having these kinds of conversations with people. The smarter our voters are, the better it is for the country. And I know you both are doing your part, so I really appreciate it.
We appreciate
Well,
that.
and what we believe here is that politics is all about relationships, and relationships are, it's what we're missing in the politics right now. It's everyone gets in their little camps, and they don't want to have a relationship with the other side and discuss and debate and still come away friends. And that's one thing that your organization and other organizations in DC really try hard to make sure that happens.
Well, and if I can just say one last thing, it's one of the reasons I went on Fox for 17 years. I did thousands of appearances. I was never paid, right? I did it because I wanted to show to Republicans that there were reasonable Democrats, right? And I felt an obligation, right, to do it. And also I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the modern Republican Party through that process. And I miss it. I wish that Fox would allow Democrats back on, but I'm happy to spend time with you guys. Whenever you need me back, happy to come back.
Great.
Okay. Well,
Hey,
great,
Simon, where can people find
Yeah,
you?
where can people find you?
Yeah, just I'm on Twitter at SimonWDC, and ndn.org are the easiest ways to find me. And I'm not quiet, and so just be prepared. A little loud in the political world. Got a lot to say.
Yeah,
but,
well, that's a good thing.
Well,
Yeah.
he's actually, I mean, and you have every right to be loud because you're well respected on both sides. So
Yeah.
thanks so much, Simon.
Thanks, guys.
Great to have
Keep
you.
up the good
Thank you.
work.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thanks, everybody.